What's up, my nomies? Good to have you along once again here on the MT and me. So, we're kicking off a brand new year. 2025 is right here upon us. Wow. And we want to start the year off by looking ahead. Some of the things we plan to do. If you happen to catch the comments that I wrote on some of the last week's video, I mentioned that this year I'd really like to get Pearl rolling. Well, a lot of things have got to happen for that to happen. All right. But before we look ahead, I thought we'd take a few minutes here and look back. Some of the highlights of what we accomplished in 2024 working on this beautiful Mobile Traveler motorhome. It's just a matter of time in this video before I bust my butt on one of these piles of wood. And with those words, I started my first video of last year. Well, I managed to get through the video without falling down, but I did have some piles of wood. If you remember watching that video, then you remember Ree gave the MT and me a Christmas present. Almost 300 board feet of 2x4s to use on the interior walls and ceiling. And that work became the very first project of 2024. Well, nice cut on both ends. I guess now we go see if it works. First, let's just see if it fits in the groove. Which it does. Okay. So, we had 2 made. Just had to make 6 more just like them. This is up. So that means that this has to go like this. Is that right? So after a couple of days of measuring and cutting and fitting, we finally had all 8 cross beams made. Then I realized that before we could even think about putting them in, there was some repair work that needed to be done. The metal bracing on Pearl's roof was completely rusted out and broken in several places. And the next step was to do something about that. Just 3/4 inch. And I'm hoping that that angle will be just right. This has been carefully measured and cut to fit this gap right here. We have to try and secure this in place so that it doesn't fall down while I'm working on it. I can't move this piece up and down anymore. It is firmly being held in line with everything else. You have a piece of reinforcement going in across this brace because of a bad spot right here in the middle. And then we have another reinforcement going from here to here. Literally the full length of 2 sections, because this was completely separated right here. And we want to be sure and brace it up. And brace it up we did. So, with the metal framework back in a nice secure position, the next thing we really had to do before getting those rafters put in across was to figure out some way to reinforce the actual ceiling in pearl. The top layer is nothing but a very thin piece of aluminum, and over the years it has been battered and weathered and wrinkled and dented and walked upon. It needs something underneath to make it a little bit firmer. And so, after tossing around a few ideas that ended up getting tossed out the window, I've come up with an idea that maybe we can use some fairly thin but strong sheets of plywood slid between the frame and the actual metal roof in strategic places, maybe a patchwork type pattern up and down pearl, in order to support that roof. We haven't really done that project yet. That's one of the things on the books for 2025. But we did experiment with it a little bit just to see if it was feasible. But it does slide into place a lot easier. I need something to cap with. Hammer. Okay. This kind of gives you an idea of what I was talking about working them side by side. There's quite a difference between support offered by the two pieces. That 3/8 inch really seems to be better. The 1/4 inch fit in place, of course, but I think it would be much better with the 3/8 if we go with the plywood. And right now it looks like we will go with the plywood. So here before too long I'll be heading to my local lumber company to get some 3/8 inch thick pieces, get them cut to some sort of perfect size that we predetermine, and get them installed between Pearl's metal framing and aluminum roof. Now, something else that had to be taken care of before we went much farther on the roof were these 4 bolts in the back. These bolts went through the metal framing and through the roof and were secured by very large nuts on the outside. Over the years, they had rusted into basically one piece. They were in my way. They would prevent me from sliding these boards that I was just talking about between the frame and the roof there on the back of Pearl, which is one of the places where it really, really needs some extra support. So, long story short, the bolts had to go. That was a lot easier said than done. The old fix-it saying is that if it doesn't move and you want it to move, use WD-40. If it moves and you don't want it to move, use duct tape. Okay, this one, the entire assembly, including the washer, is turning. So that means the nut, the bolt, and the washer are all fused together. While it's still warm, and there, you can see all 4 bolts have now been removed. Problem solved. Flat roof on the back, leaving some holes that we'll have to plug, but we have this heavy tarp covering the top of Pearl, so for the time being, she's staying waterproof. The main thing is now that we have those bolts out, the repairs done on the framing, as soon as we get those wooden panels in, we can go in and position the 8 cross beams that we've made and get them secured in place. That should give Pearl a pretty steady roof. And that goal is one of the earliest ones that we have here in 2025. Fingers are crossed on that one, too. One of the other big goals of 2024 was to get Pearl's engine running. I didn't quite accomplish that, but we are so close. And it all started by getting the accessory belts back on. Okay, I think we have everything we need here. Now, if I remember, this bolt is loose. And yeah, it is. Okay, so this one's the problem. Does not appear to be getting anywhere. Maybe I can get the leverage. And just move it enough to get this belt on. Let's see. Looky there. I got it on. Now I just have to tighten it back up, but I think that'll be easy. Okay. So with all the belts in place, everything tightened down, looked like we were almost ready to see if that engine was going to turn over. She wasn't ready to run, but maybe she'd turn over. But before we went any further than that, I had a chance to check out something that will be necessary for her to run, and that is the fuel tank. We've been concerned that Pearl had set up for so long, I didn't know what might be in her gas tank. It could be full of water, it could be full of sludge, it could be full of some sort of jellied gasoline that might be some form of napalm that could possibly blow up. I just didn't know what was in there. So with some help from my neighbor Thomas from across the street, we pulled out his trusty inspection light once again that we used on Pearl's motor over a year ago, and did a little probing down in the gas tank just to see what it might be like inside. Okay, well, you've got the screen there. I'm just going to go in here and go kind of slow. Alright, and see what we're looking at. And it's not the least bit wet. So it appears
that looks like the bottom.
Yeah. It looks like that might be the float arm. Until there's a figure, I'll take that out. I don't know.
Right. You probably have to replace that.
Seriously doubt it's got a sock on it anymore after, what, 40, 44, 45 years.
Yes.
So, but at least it's there, so that's good.
Sediment from old gas.
Sediment, yeah, in there, something like that. Something that maybe stuck to the surface or something like that.
Yeah.
So that is something handy, huh? Well, gee, that's some really good news.
Yeah.
So we had some interesting finds there, and it has set the stage for another 2025 project that will be dropping the gas tank out of Pearl completely, getting her completely rinsed out and cleaned out and ready to run. And of course, reinstalled. We'll have to do that too. There was another problem that I needed to look at before we thought about trying to fire up the starting circuit. Pearl apparently was suffering from what they call a parasitic drain on her battery. Now, this is where you have a very small current that is constantly on the battery, even when everything's turned off, when the keys are off and the doors are shut and the lights are out and everything. Something's still causing a drain, usually just a few hundredths of an amp, a few milliamps. And but this will drain your battery. It'll kill a battery in a week's time if it's constant. And that's what was happening with Pearl. Her battery kept running down on me, and I couldn't figure out why. So I started checking, decided to look for a current drain coming off of her battery. And when we did discover one, we had to go to her fuse box to try and isolate where it was coming from. Oh yeah, there we are. Now we're seeing a 0.2 amp draw, well 0.2, so that's 200 milliamps, 203, 204, a 200 milliamp draw on the battery. Let's take one fuse out at a time and see if it makes any difference. That one obviously did not. There again, no difference. 3 more to go. I think we found something. Oh, look at that. This fuse was in the circuit causing all the trouble. Alright, it's the fuse for, of all things, the dome light, which has been taken out for a long time, and the cigarette lighter, which has never been used. Not since we've gotten Pearl. It never would be used. Well, not to light anything to smoke anyway. Might plug something in there to power it up. But we haven't even done that yet. So I don't know why that circuit was giving a constant drain. But without this fuse, it's dead. It doesn't do it. Still have no idea why the cigarette lighter is draining the battery. But for now, that fuse is out, that circuit is dead, and there is no more current drain. I will cross the problem of the cigarette lighter somewhere later on down the road. It is pretty low on my priority list. So maybe we'll get to that in 2025. But I'm not making any promises there. I do want to get that engine to turn over again and actually get running sometime this year. Now, I say turn over again because, oh, the most beautiful moment of the year, I firmly believe, was one day in the autumn when I turned the key. Let's see if this ignition system will turn the starter and the engine over. Not started, because we're just not hooked up for that. We got no fuel, no gas, nothing to run the engine. But I want to see if the electrics are working as far as cranking goes. Let's see what happens. I think it's gonna work. And work it did. She turned over beautifully. That little grinding noise is one of the most lovely sounds I could have possibly heard. But, as it usually comes with every good thing, there was a downside. I was so excited about getting the starter to turn over and the engine to at least semi-crank that I did not notice a problem. There. Now, can you see that? It's literally bare wire right there. So that is the source of our smoke. The question is why? Why indeed? And even though I have worked in electronics all my life and know quite a bit about electricity, not necessarily automotive electricity, that's kind of a different animal, but I do know the basics anyway. It took me a while to figure this one out. So let me give you the story in a nutshell. Whenever I first was checking the alternator in Pearl, I took it out completely, took it off, and gave it a good cleaning, ran a few preliminary tests on it. Everything looked fine. It was okay. When I was reinstalling it, I dropped a small screw that actually secured one of the brush mounts in place on the back. Now, I looked for that thing and I couldn't find it. So I said, all right, well, I've searched around and finally found another screw that would fit, that would do the job. And so I installed it. So I put it all back together, had the alternator all hooked back up. And then we went through this starting cycle that you just saw. And for some reason, that wire that went to the terminal where that screw had been got so hot. As you saw, it melted the insulation and would have melted the wire in two if I hadn't have caught it in time. So what's the problem? Well, a little studying and a little research, and I discovered that that screw, the one I dropped, had a very special washer on it. It was an insulated washer. It wasn't made of metal. It was made of something to keep the screw from contacting the actual lead that the wire was attached to, the lead that went to the brush of the alternator. Because with that screw being screwed into the case, it was grounded. The case of the alternator goes to ground. It ties directly to the engine block. Well, that lead on the alternator is not supposed to be grounded. The way I had it hooked up, it was grounded through that screw. And that is why the voltage went back through it like it did. It was going to ground. It got hot. It would have burned the whole thing up if we hadn't caught it in time. Said, well, we've got to find some sort of insulated, something to insulate that screw. So I dug around, found some insulated washers, and put that whole assembly back together. And of course had to repair the wire. And eventually, I think, we've got the alternator back to where it should be functioning just fine, with no smoke and no unnatural grounding. But the problem may not be solved just yet. Well, we obviously still have another problem. Now, we don't have any smoke. That's good. And I can hear the starter solenoid clicking. That's good. But I'm not getting power to the starter. It's not even trying to turn over. And that, of course, is not good. My current line of thought, because this is coming up right at the end of this past year, uh, is that the starter's bad. Now, we're going to have to take it off, check it out to see. I tried checking it in place, and indications are it is not working. But just to be sure, we're going to drop the starter again, pull it off, double check to see if it's functioning. And if the starter's bad, well, we'll replace it, and maybe we'll get that engine to turn over again. Once we reach that point, then our next steps, here again, these are plans for 2025, will be to, first of all, we got to finish hooking up the carburetor. It's installed, it's got the vacuum hoses hooked up and everything like that. It does not have a fuel line run to it yet. The fuel pump seems to be in good shape and seems to work. We still have that mysterious electric fuel pump that I'm not sure works or not. It's in line coming right out of the fuel tank, so we'll need to check it out again. We will, of course, have to, as I just said a few minutes ago, drop the fuel tank and get it cleaned out and put it back in before we can even think about putting gas in it and running gas through. Now, once we get the motor running, I still can't exactly drive Pearl off. If you remember our very earliest videos, there was a problem with her left rear wheel. It didn't turn. We had to drag that baby off the trailer that brought her to Arkansas because that wheel was locked up. Here again, long story short, turned out that the whole brake assembly had come apart and twisted inside the brake shoe. And when we finally got the drum off, the brake drum off, then all the brake assembly came out. Point is, there are absolutely no brakes on that rear wheel. I haven't checked out the rest of the brakes either, so I've still got to repair the brakes on the left rear wheel, put the guts back in there, buy new guts and put it in there. While I'm doing that, I may as well do the right one too, because usually you buy all that stuff in pairs. You fix one, you fix the other one. So I've got that. And then I've got to go to the front wheels, and they're disc brakes, so I'll have to check out the pads and the disc on them and see what kind of condition they're in, because I have not even given them a cursory look at this point. And one other really big thing that has to be addressed is the floor in her cab over area. It has leaked and rotted, and that flooring has to be completely replaced. So that's got to be done before any kind of interior work can progress very far. I know it seems like I keep pulling problems out of thin air, but they're there, and they've always been there. You know, Pearl was first sold in 1977. She's been around a while. She has seen some wear and tear and some really bad weather. And she saw a very long, extended time of just sitting on a dealer's lot doing nothing but slowly starting to rust away. Well, we caught her before that got too bad. I still want to give her new life, and I want you to come along with me. So what I'm saying is, as we start this 2025 year on the MT and Me, if you haven't subscribed, do so. Please give me a thumbs up on this video and all of them that you watch, and I hope you watch all of them. We're here every week, even the weeks that we don't really do anything for whatever reason. So anyway, please stay with us for the work on Pearl in 2025, and for everything else that's going to happen too. A few things I might mention briefly for 2024. In addition to what I just told you about Pearl, I also bought a car. Oh, by the way, yeah, in February I bought a used car. It's a Chevrolet Equinox, and some of my programs are focused on my work on it. So if you have an Equinox or something similar in the early 2000 Chevy line, maybe you can pick up a few tips from what I'm having to deal with on this car. It runs pretty good, but it's got its issues. So we've got some programs this year that will deal with work on the Equinox. What else happened in 24? Oh, we saw a total eclipse of the sun. Went up to Ree was in Sheridan, Arkansas, near Central Arkansas at the time, and we went up to her place and with some friends and watched a total eclipse of the sun. That doesn't happen every day. That was interesting. We shared that with you. And the other big event of the year was something that was heartbreaking for me. I I lost my very oldest and dearest friend during 2024. Passed away back in July. And Bob, I still miss you. I don't want to miss you though. So hang around, join us every week here on the MT and Me. I will keep it coming to you, all right? Because you're my nomies. And I love you. Thanks again for being part of the plan all through 2024. And as we kick off a new year, it's going to be better than ever. Just wait and see. Until next time around, I'm Russ. We will talk later.